Last weekend, we had the first of two Motorverse Cup qualifiers here for Illuvium Arena. This was also the first opportunity we've had to see the current patch in a competitive setting. So now that we have hundreds, if not thousands, of games under our belt, now we can actually figure out what are the best five teams currently in Illuvium Arena. Let me break them down here for you. For those who don't know me, my name's Sylen. I've been a commentator since the release of StarCraft 2, and I've been a long-time player here of Illuvium, been around since the first Illuvium Zero land sale, and especially since August of last year, I've gone absolutely deep into Illuvium to the point where I'm on the arena leaderboards very, very consistently. So let me help break this down. Top teams in the Illuvium Arena. At number 5, we have Granite Vanguards. Now, Rogues got absolutely smashed in the last patch, being completely solo targeted, getting all the rogues nerfed at least a little bit, and then especially the Vanguard rogues got absolutely clobbered. However, they are still performing admirably. It scared a lot of people away to where rogues maybe aren't a part of their main teams anymore, but rogues, especially this Granite Vanguard style or even the Verdant Vanguard style, can still perform very, very well to players that are actually good at piloting a rogue team. If you're going specifically for this Granite Vanguard style scene here at number 5, you're going to want to pick up the Quake Maulers. We see it here on the right-hand side. But it's such a flexible weapon because it allows you to have little power spikes throughout the match and not just at the very end. But with a lot of these Illuvials that you're going to be getting, there's a lot of tier 1s involved. And with that, you can actually pivot and change your bonding with your ranger to what kind of compositions you're actually going up against. So if you want to have Granite nice and early, picking up 3 snails, getting yourself the TNT, that will absolutely be clutch. You could also pair up with another rogue potentially and get 3 Predator online, or pair up with your Revo and get Dust online early versus auto attack kind of compositions. There are many ways that you can play this thing early as you wait for your Malura and for your Slash-In. Those, of course, your main 2 units to get Vanguard online, and then especially with Slash-In, that's your main hyper carry for this team. You do have plenty of damage elsewhere, but the Slash-In is where most of your augments are going to be focused. You're going to want to make sure that Slash-In has a good mixture of damage, as well as some safety in regards to maybe some brawler augments, maybe the Restorating Impact Reactor or the Phase Breaker to break targeting, one way or another to keep that Slash-In alive. When you get into the later game, once you start hitting level 8, level 9, that's when you can start looking into some of these higher tier Illuvials. If you're going up against a corner composition, for example, Ramp Fight will do you wonders. The big AoE burst damage that Ramp Fight does provide will allow Slash-In to have some softer health bars to chew through and really start letting it snowball. And then once you get Goliant, that'll be an additional Granite user you can now have online. Pair your Ranger up with your Goliant, and now you'll have your Ranger as a Granite Vanguard, which will just give you the most opportune chance of having some success here still with rogues, even after the nerf. But again, you don't have to necessarily go exactly for this way. You can very well try a different route here with the Verdant Vanguard style, and it'll still be rather effective. Granite is probably performing a little bit better, but you can absolutely say switch out the Titanor and instead go for a Twine to get Verdant Vanguard online for some healing as well. So you have a little bit of flexibility, and don't worry, rogue players, your rogues are still just fine. Number 4 on my list is going to be Steam Harbinger. This is a classic from back in the Illuvium Pro League that is still strong even here today. You have to be a little bit more careful though with your Umber, who is your hyper carry for this team, because it no longer has untargetability, right? It has dodge attached to its Omega instead of that untargetability. So you just can't send your Umber in there willy-nilly. You have to actually position it properly, give it the best opportunity to actually be able to snowball. But thankfully, it does not have to do all the carrying alone per se. There are still plenty of other damage dealers on this team, like we're seeing here with the Dualef. If you're able to potentially get a Dualef, that's of course an absolute fantastic bunker buster. Same thing here with the Mamu. Mamu having the Incisor Eyes, being able to constantly launch opponents into big groups and get massive stuns, massive damage onto a huge group like that will definitely allow for Umber to go absolutely crazy. Getting Riplance here as well, probably one of the best, if not the best, single target DPS unit in the game outside of the Slashin. Having a Riplance or even a Riptorus would be absolutely fantastic. In regards to the tank line, you have a little bit of help here as well. Getting the Axon or potentially all the way up to Axodon. Caradulo going all the way up to maybe Caradulox if things are going your way. But you don't have to sit there. It's okay being on Axon or just Caradulo and being able to move forth. It'll be a little bit squishier, that you could hit these high value targets much quicker, as long as once you get to say level 7 or level 8, as long as you have a Singe as well that you can pair your Aqua Blaster to. This way you can actually unlock Steam Harbinger onto your Ranger and allow for that snowballing damage amplifying style that Steam does provide. And then this one's listing the Aqua Blaster as the weapon of choice, but you can do this with 1 or 2 more weapons. You could very well do this with the Ripple Flail as well. You just then need a Fire Scion of some sort, but thankfully there is one that is absolutely in the meta. Right here, pick up the Fury, and you'd be able to get Steam Harbinger that way. Another way that you could potentially do this as well is with the Lava Gauntlet or even the Ember Buckler. There are multiple ways to be able to get the Steam affinity online to let your Umber go crazy, let Dualef go crazy, and essentially let them become a ramping time bomb for your opponent to have to deal with. We've seen a lot of defensive compositions lately really trying to start rolling out. Well, hey, the longer the game goes, the more powerful you become here. Speaking of defensive comps, let's hop into our number 3, Granite Mystic. Mystic in general has definitely been seeing a lot more play since the Penguins and the rest of the Rogues actually got nerfed. Of course, with Mystics, the big idea is that you're going to be dropping down to about half HP, and then you get additional damage amplification, but also damage reduction. Being able to then get more shields and then get healed on top of that, you still keep those buffs. So you're going to be able to just hit longer and sustain very well throughout the fight. Having Granite as well, being able to make the start of your game just that much more defensively sound is going to do you wonders. Weapon-wise, you have a few options, but a popular one here is the Earth Maul, and you're going to be able to get Granite very quickly. And then you can kind of pivot as to what variant of Granite you want from there. Picking up TNT nice and fast once again to get that Granite online is definitely very good. Getting the Greater App-on, a unit that isn't usually too contested these days, is going to be your first Mystic. And there's going to be your first small power spike in regards to getting that Mystic buff. But where this team lives or dies is getting the big Mystics that are the tier 4s and the tier 5s. Because those ones don't show up as middle stage evolutions or stage 1s. You have to get the fully evolved version of the Geyser and the Adorius. Especially the Adorius being a tier 5, Adorito is splashed into basically every single team composition. So trying to hit that 4th Mystic can sometimes make or break you the game. If you're stuck at 3 Mystic, you're just barely not able to actually hold on. Get that 4th Mystic, and it feels like your team doesn't die, and it's absolutely incredible. And with it being a defensive style, you want some absolute units in the front line. So the Komodo Dragon line, so getting the Krunk or getting the Blotto potentially is a way that you can do that. Getting Wildfire could potentially happen here as well. If you're lucky enough to get the Krunk as well as the Blazonite, you would then be able to enable Wildfire, which is just another slow heal towards your big tank, as well as just additional damage slowly ticking away on your opponent. As if timing them out wasn't already crazy enough, well, you still can have some serious damage in this team revolving around the Scoriox in particular. Tuck the Scoriox into a safe place in your corner composition and just keep it as safe as possible. Let it just open fire and just enjoy all of the shields and damage amplification that this team can provide. And then if you're lucky and you get to go one step further, maybe you can even tune into the Arcanite side of things a little bit more by getting Phosphorus online. That is another fully evolved tier 5. However, in the late game, you're going to be rolling for Adorius and Titanor anyway. So if you can pick up foes as well and potentially get Phosphorus, that's just going to boost your damage even more so. This team, as is, even without the Phosphorus, will probably win a lot of games just based off of timeouts. At the 45-second mark, that's when the overtime pulses come through and start to wipe the team. which this Mystic team is very good at beating you in an overtime scenario. So a very expensive team that relies on a lot of late stage Illuvials and fully evolved Illuvials. But if you hit this, it's really good. All right, the second best team from the Motorverse Cup qualifier ended up being Inferno Behemoth. Six Fire has definitely taken off this patch, and a lot of it just has to do with the fact that there's a good power spike in the early game, as well as absolute explosive damage late game. But this does rely in the late game on finding a good handful of fully evolved tier 4 and tier 5 Illuvials. If you end up getting contested going for this build and you're not willing to pivot, you could be in for a world of hurt. However, this build is still pretty flexible, allowing you to do a few other things. But the main game plan starting off in the early game, you could honestly just get a bunch of fire units early. You have the Chuko, the Rai, you have the Tiru. Ace is a tier 3 that's relatively easy to hit as well. If your ranger has a fire weapon, you have a 5th fire just like that. One chip or one additional alluvial if you happen to get lucky and find a flare or a rampy. Well, there you go. 6 fire already online. And that is a massive DPS buff that now includes percentage health damage on every single auto attack. But the main core that you're going to want to go for here, you do keep the Railu, but that's more so to keep Templar on your team, because that's going to pair up with Fernite rather nicely, just being able to give even more damage and more tankiness to your Illuvials as the fight's going on. A couple of the units are going to want to hit early. As much as we'd love the Monarchs, sometimes it's not going to be able to get it, but you can still make this team work with just an Arctase. That is a-okay. That's where Inferno starts to actually take place. And then at this point here, you can then start looking into Scoriox. Scoriox, like we're seeing in a couple of these teams here in this video, has just been absolutely popping off since the patch. And with that, getting the Arcanite online is definitely doable as well with this team composition. Pair the Arctase or pair the Scoriox up with your Ranger while it has like the Strike Boomerang like shown here. And there you go. We have Arcanite online. And that can be a huge mid-game power spike that'll still let you keep winning rounds as you're looking for your behemoths later. But a reminder in regards to what Behemoth even does. So the idea here is that Behemoths basically take their max health and deal a percentage of it as physical damage, and then it consistently stuns as well. So not only are they doing a ton of damage, but they're also fantastic for crowd control, stunning, whether it happens to be going up against a Rip Lance and being able to shut it down, the slashing and shutting it down, just any single target you're going to be constantly firing off stuns for. And again, there's multiple behemoths, so you're going to be able to potentially stack stuns or potentially just stun multiple different enemies at the same time. It's really beautiful once this starts to come into fruition here. But you do need the fully evolved Seer, you do need the fully evolved Jotun in order for Behemoth to come through. The middle stage evolutions will not have Behemoth, so this is where I was saying if you're getting contested at all, trying to force Behemoth could get you in trouble. But at that point, you can kind of pivot more into the Arcanite kind of style, or pivot harder into the Templar kind of style with the weapon that you're currently using. Optimally, you pick up a Beetle as well here, whether that be the Goliath or the Titan, or if things go your way, just to have some sort of frontliner that isn't necessarily one of your Behemoths themselves. While they are tanky, they're not very good at tanking a whole crowd. So you do want to have the Goliath or the Titan there with you. And then getting the Rampfire is basically the icing on the cake, getting that massive AoE damage and an additional Inferno as well. That way you're doing so much ticking damage from the Inferno proc that it just softens everybody up for the Scoriox or for the Behemoths to just tear through the rest of the team. And then I have Phosphorus here as well. If you want to go a little bit harder into the Arcanite style, you can pick up Phosphorus as well while you're trying to roll for Rampfight and Goliath. So again, it might be a bit of a hard team to hit, but if you do hit it, it hits like an absolute truck, and that's why it's our second best team of the Motorverse Cup. Last but not least, your number one team from the Motorverse Cup ended up being Toxic Aegis, a classic style once again from the Illuvium Pro League that has just gotten the opportunity to pop right off with the nerfs to the rogue teams. It's coming off as pretty strong because it has multiple power spikes at various sections throughout the game, while also allowing you to be relatively flexible in regards to who your carry ends up being. Of course, with this Aegis style, you're basically pumping all of your stats into one Illuvial that you're going to choose as your hyper carry. But thankfully, who that hyper carry is can be changed if necessary. Just because we have a certain Illuvial as the carry in this team list right here doesn't necessarily mean you have to stay that way, and that's kind of the beautiful part about this build. nice and early, like your first big power spike that you're going to want to go for is first off getting an Axon and Caradulo for your front line. Caradulo, especially having that toxic trait, you're going to want 100%. Especially if you're using the Elderwood staff, that's your empath nature weapon in this instance here. Then especially getting Archos. That's when you can actually get Aegis online. If you happen to have the Elderwood staff, pair up with one of your bulwarks. That way you get the Aegis online. Then you can start to position your Illuvials so that you're pumping all of those stats into the one Illuvial. Say an early game team that you could potentially do here, say you happen to have the Greater Monk here, which I definitely recommend picking up. You can put your stats into the Greater Monk here. Or maybe you're just running one of the normal Lynxes. Heck, you can Aegis buff one of those. And you can run with that up until the point you're finally starting to get your next level carry, which at least for this build will be your Riptorus or your Rip Lance. Getting the Scorpion fully evolved would be absolutely incredible. It's a level 7 roll down or a level 8 roll down. So you're going to be spending a little bit in the mid game more so than early. But God forbid, if you do manage to actually hit Rip Lance and you have the Monk here on board, that is a major power spike being able to get up to Berserker that might be able to get you pretty much all the way to the end of the game. But some of these players are really, really good now, so that might not necessarily be the kill shot. So that's when we have to start looking into our next Illuvials. While you're looking for Rip Lance, you can also be looking for Hetty as well, because if you can manage to get the Blotto fully evolved, that is another Aegis unit that can then pump stats into your Rip Lance, which would be absolutely incredible, or whatever your carry happens to be at the time. You're going to want to have Blazonite in here as well if you do that, because then you have additional Wildfire, allowing for your tanks to just survive and just do a bunch of additional damage as well. You're going to want to have some sort of long-range healing, so that's why Adorius is going to be my pick here for this one, because while your Archos is doing a fantastic job of maybe keeping the tanks alive in the front line, your Rip Lance or your Monk Gear or any of your damage Illuvials might run away from Archos while chasing down the opponent, so you need something that can heal from range. Adorito or Adorius is definitely the way to go there. And then oftentimes what ends up being the kill shot, especially if you know you're going up against one of these corner comps that we've seen in our top 5 list, you need some sort of AoE. Rip Lance is a fantastic Illuvial and probably one of the best of the game, like I was saying before, at single target damage. However, big clumps of Illuvials it has a hard time with. Trying to hit the Scoriox in the back of a bunker composition is not something it's very good at doing. So that's where Phosphorus comes in. Once you get leveled up to level 9 or potentially even level 10, if you're able to start looking for foes, start looking for Phosphorus. This way, eventually, once you get your Phosphorus online, you can switch it so that Rip Lance is no longer the one Aegis buffed. You then Aegis buff the Phosphorus, make that the super carry that can absolutely shred through a bunker. Of course, it's Omega, the Ghosting Screams, able to hit everything within a straight line in front of it. So it is an absolute bunker destroyer. And then in a worst case scenario, you're going for Rip Lance, somebody else got Rip Lance. You're going for Phosphorus, but somebody's way ahead of you at getting Phoruses. Like, it could be difficult to try and force. But of course, the beautiful thing about Aegis, just pick up a carry from somewhere different. Pick up a Jotun or something along those lines. Try to find what melee carry, or sometimes even a ranged carry. If you happen to hit a Scoriox with this, why not go for it? As long as you have some sort of other carry that you can cleanly shoot for, Aegis will buff it one way or another. It works a little bit better with melee compared to ranged, but ranged can still make use of it. So while this may be the baseline for a toxic Aegis team, don't be afraid to pivot from it. Its flexibility on top of all the damage it provides is why Toxic Aegis was the best team in the Motorverse Cup qualifier. We still have another Motorverse Cup qualifier coming up this weekend. Are you planning on introducing any of these teams to your build by chance? I'd love to see it. Start practicing it on leveling up your Illuvials on ranked now. And let me know in the comments, is there something that you think was left off this list that might start showing up a little bit more in the second Motorverse Cup qualifier? We'll have to see. It's going to be an exciting couple of weekends. Again, Qualifier 2 this week coming up, and then the semifinals and finals going to be happening the weekend right after. So it's going to be a fun time. I'm looking forward to commentating the event and watching you all compete for, of course, the big old prizes at the end of the tunnel. If this video helped you at all or you enjoyed your time, it would mean the world to me if you can drop a subscription onto the channel. Been trying my best to grow this channel strictly off of Illuvium, and it's been an absolute blast so far. I look forward to doing this as long as I possibly can. And if you wish to support me or the events that I run, like House League, for example, happens almost every Friday, I do have a referral code in the Illuvidex. My code is Sylen. certain purchases in the Illuvidex will give a little bit of a kickback to a content creator. Anything I make from my referral code goes back into the community one way or another through House League prizing. Speaking of House League, of course, those matches are all streamed. If you want to take a look at seeing some of the top players in action and maybe get a glimpse of who could potentially be in the grand finals come the end of Motorverse Cup, have a watch.